this way. I separate the two. Operational excellence, I think, is more of an umbrella that is broader and has to do with the workings of a business, whether that be a marketing campaign, whether it be financial reporting, whether it be decision making or driving customer loyalty, any of those. And I view process excellence as sort of the more granular manifestation of what you have to do to deliver on those operational processes. So in other words, it's how do we do things better, faster, cheaper to achieve financial reporting or customer loyalty. My journey in this career field has been one of focusing on internal metrics, trying to improve what we do internally, very much focused and very much confined. And of course, we always know that a process has an output. That's what a SIPOC is for, right? And so we always know that there's an output and we're doing it for a reason. But I think the reasons today are different. I think in a world where you have constantly changing demands of the customer, and they're getting more and more demanding. You know, companies like Amazon are raising that bar every single day. And I think we're moving now from a place where we don't say, what does the data tell us only? That's not sufficient. It's the experience that we're creating. How does that make someone, a customer, feel? And that's really the softer side of process excellence and operational excellence. And I think that if we ignore that, then we're being a bit myopic. And I think the next generation of operational excellence needs to encompass that. I think the first thing that we did, step one, is we had to acknowledge that when we said we were customer-centric, that we weren't really behaving in that way. And so that was my observation, and there was a disconnect there. And I had to try to figure out, how do I let everybody know that they're saying the right thing, but they're not doing the right thing. And I'll give you a couple examples. There were two main offenders. One was the finance group, and their bias, when they said we're customer-centric, what they really meant was, if it's good for our financials, then the customer must like it. And then the other group that had incredible bias with, and the biggest disconnect between what they did and what they said with respect to customer centricity was the engineering team. And Silicon Valley's full of really bright people, and they like to work on challenging problems. And their bias was, if it's fun for me to work on, then the customer must need it. And so the challenge, the first step was sort of acknowledging that. I kind of saw that as foundational. You have to acknowledge that what you're doing is not really customer focused or customer centric, that it's really serving your own purpose. And that was the biggest first step. And so I was able to crack that and get people to understand that they were looking at the world through their own lenses. So that was step number one. Step number two was institutionalizing some tools that helped remind us all the time to be customer-centric, like customer journey mapping, like design thinking. We introduced design thinking, which demands that you take the customer's input at the onset of a project when you're designing either a new product or new features for an existing product. And so using those kinds of tools and embedding them into the organization was the next step. What I did was I built an organization that went from sort of opportunistic, customer-centric projects to having almost sort of a consultative practice or a partner model within the company, where I would work with you and I would teach your team about using these tools and how they should be looking at things as they do their work. And so that's step two. And so we spent the better part of 3 years doing that, and now we're on to step three, which is moving away from that model, that consultant or partner model, and actually embedding that capability into those organizations. So in other words, making the organization that I created obsolete by moving them into different parts of the business, which is exactly what I did. That's how I ended up going from the head of customer experience into the global shipping role, was because that is the largest customer pain point that we identified in our work. And they said, okay, Steven, we want you to go in there and help solve that in this part of the business. I'm pretty sure that the rest of my team will end up making moves like that in the future. And that's sort of the final step in embedding it into the culture. Yeah, I think the biggest thing is to walk in the customer's shoes. I used a term that I used to tell everybody, I said, be the customer. In the eBay example, That means go on eBay, go as a user, not as an employee, but go on eBay, buy things, experience what it's like to interact with the seller. Maybe you don't get your item on time. Maybe you interact with customer service. If you haven't sold anything, that's sometimes not the easiest thing to do. Go sell on the site. You can't understand what our buyers and sellers are going through if you don't experience it yourself. It's just theoretical, it's not real, it's not actual. And so that is the biggest thing that I challenge people to do. And I can do that by maybe gamifying our work a little bit and having little contests about how, who's sold the most in our group in the past 3 months, or who's bought the most, who's generated the most activity on the site. So that's a way to ensure and kind of have a little bit of peer pressure there so that everybody can do it, participate, because ultimately, if you're not walking in the customer's shoes, then you probably have a lower chance of succeeding in delighting a customer.